The Galactic Concorde's dominance had gone unchallenged for millennia, and its vast network of colonies stretched across the galaxy like a web of control. No one had dared to question its supremacy until Earth. Humanity's rise from a fractured, war-torn world to a fledgling spacefaring species had been slow, clumsy even. But the Concorde didn't see Earth's potential. They saw only a tiny blue planet struggling to find its place in the cosmos. When the Concorde scout ship, the Velorath, arrived in the Sol system, its mission was simple: observe. The Concorde had watched many species over the eons, cataloging their potential and deciding their fates. Earth, by all estimations, was a planet destined for slow assimilation, where they would eventually join the ranks of the lesser races under the Concorde's watchful eye. But as the Velorath hovered in orbit above Earth, something unusual happened. The ship's sensors began to detect faint, erratic signals that didn't match the usual patterns of planetary interference. At first, they chalked it up to solar flares or magnetic anomalies. But the Velorath was a vessel designed for precision, and its crew knew better. These were deliberate, encoded transmissions, an anomaly far beyond anything the Concorde had encountered from a species like Earth. The signals were human. A deep sense of unease began to spread through the ship. The crew had been instructed to monitor and report, not engage. But now they were faced with the fact that someone, or something, on Earth was actively reaching out, and they knew exactly how to do it. The Concorde's arrogance about humanity was beginning to falter. It was as if Earth had been hiding something all along, something far more dangerous than they appeared. The captain of the Velorath, Commander Thalax, ordered an immediate transmission to the Concorde High Command. It was a warning, though he wasn't sure whether it was meant to be a caution or a justification. "We are not alone," he transmitted, using an encrypted channel. The message was brief but chilling, echoing in the minds of every officer aboard. And then, just as quickly, the transmission went dead. All contact with the Velorath was lost. The Concorde fleet assumed it was a technical failure. After all, Earth's technology couldn't possibly match their own. But as the days passed without any sign of the Velorath, an unsettling thought began to form in the minds of the Concorde's leaders. What if it wasn't a failure at all? What if the humans were already playing a game they hadn't even known existed? Days passed with no word from the Velorath. The Concorde's High Command dismissed the incident as a minor glitch in their vast network, an anomaly that would soon be resolved. But Commander Thalax's last message haunted the edges of their thoughts. "We are not alone." It lingered, nagging at them like a whisper in the dark. The Concorde sent another cruiser, the Sovereign's Pride, to investigate. A heavily armed ship, it was a symbol of the Concorde's belief in their own unassailable power. This time, they sent not just a few officers, but a full reconnaissance crew, as well as an elite squadron of combat drones. The cruiser's mission was clear: find the Velorath, retrieve the crew, and eliminate any potential threats Earth might have posed. There was no room for hesitation or doubt. But the Sovereign's Pride never returned. The Concorde fleet waited. A few hours, then days, passed in tense silence, but there was still no communication. It was then that an unexpected transmission pinged the Concorde network, emanating from deep within the Sol system. Human in origin. The message was incomprehensible, encrypted with a sophistication that defied the Concorde's most advanced decoders. Yet, one word stood out, repeated like a drumbeat in the static: surrender. The message was chilling, but that wasn't the most troubling part. The Sovereign's Pride was still silent, as was the Velorath. The Concorde High Command had their suspicions, but they refused to act on them until they received a new signal. This time, the source was not a standard communication. It was a live feed. The galaxy's greatest military minds watched in stunned disbelief as the Sovereign's Pride appeared on their screens, but something was horribly wrong. The ship was in pieces, half destroyed, floating in the black void of space. But it wasn't destroyed by a simple battle. The Pride had been torn apart from within. The ship's hull was fractured, its internal systems sabotaged, and the crew's remains were scattered across space. The final, horrifying realization sank in. The humans hadn't just destroyed the Sovereign's pride. They had hacked it. Every system, every safety measure, every defense mechanism had been overridden. The Concorde's prized flagship had been turned into a weapon of its own destruction, without the Concorde even realizing what was happening until it was too late. As the horror of the situation set in, panic spread through the Concorde's ranks. Their complacency had cost them dearly. Their arrogance in believing that humanity was too primitive to pose a real threat had just been shattered. Earth was no longer a nuisance. It was a danger. And for the first time in centuries, the Concorde realized that it had underestimated the most dangerous variable in the universe, human ingenuity. The question now was no longer how to observe Earth, but how to survive it. The Concorde's internal chaos spread like wildfire. The Sovereign's pride was just the beginning. In the span of a few days, 2 more Concorde ships, an advanced reconnaissance cruiser, and a battleship, had vanished, lost without a trace. The Concorde, once a unified force, was now divided by fear and paranoia. Their fleets, designed to be unstoppable, now seemed like floating targets for a mysterious, unseen enemy. Meanwhile, back on Earth, humanity's true preparations were coming to light. The Terran Defense Pact, a clandestine alliance of Earth's major military powers, had been quietly preparing for an inevitable conflict with the galaxy's so-called superpowers for decades. The world had long suspected that humanity's place in the universe was precarious, that the Concorde, like many other galactic empires, would one day take notice of Earth's progress and move to either enslave or eliminate them. For years, Earth's brightest minds had worked in secret, combining their scientific breakthroughs with stolen alien technology from long-forgotten wrecks of deep space. They had turned their planet's meager resources into the perfect weapon. Humanity's strategy was simple but deadly: outsmart, outmaneuver, and overwhelm. The first sign of their military might came when the first Terran warship entered the fray. It was an unassuming vessel at first glance, sleek, black, and almost undetectable in the vast expanse of space. But this was no ordinary craft. It had been constructed with stolen Concorde stealth technology, its hull reinforced with alloys scavenged from other alien ships. Its weapon systems were based on reverse-engineered energy sources, combining human ingenuity with elements alien to the Concorde. The ship's pilot, Captain Ilara Voss, had a reputation among the Terran fleet as a tactical genius, and she was about to prove it. She led a daring raid on a Concorde supply line, destroying several vital supply ships while avoiding a full-scale engagement with the main fleet. The human ship's evasive tactics, unpredictable, erratic, and aggressive, confused and overwhelmed the Concorde forces, who had never encountered such a style of warfare. It was clear that these humans fought not like soldiers, but like predators. In a daring move, Captain Voss hacked a Concorde relay station, transmitting a message back to the heart of the galaxy, the birthplace of the Concorde itself. The message was simple: "We are coming." For the first time, the Concorde faced a terrifying reality. Earth was no longer a backwater planet. It was a force that could and would fight back. Humanity wasn't just making a stand, they were orchestrating an uprising. And the galaxy, still blissfully unaware, would soon learn just how devastating the Terran ingenuity could be. The Concorde's response to humanity's growing audacity was swift and furious. The High Command knew that they could no longer underestimate Earth's capabilities. In a desperate bid to crush the human rebellion before it could gain any more ground, they assembled the largest fleet the galaxy had seen in centuries, a force of thousands of warships, led by the mighty dreadnought Unyielding. Commander Verax, the Concorde's most seasoned military strategist, was appointed to lead the operation. A being of cold logic and ruthless efficiency, Verax had overseen the destruction of countless worlds. He had never encountered an adversary that couldn't be outflanked or overwhelmed by sheer firepower. Humanity, to him, was little more than an inconvenience, until now. The Concorde fleet deployed in tight formation, designed to crush anything that stood in its way. But as the Unyielding and its battle group entered the Sol system, something unexpected happened. The human forces, though vastly outnumbered, didn't retreat. They didn't even fight in the way the Concorde had anticipated. Instead, humanity's ships, small and agile, engaged in a dance of chaos and misdirection, darting through the massive fleet with pinpoint precision. The Unyielding fired its immense cannons, but the human ships danced around the blasts, weaving in and out of their trajectories as if they could predict every move the Concorde made. In the midst of this madness, Captain Ilara Voss's warship, now the flagship of the Terran fleet, executed an audacious maneuver. She ordered a full-speed attack directly into the heart of the enemy formation. The Concorde commanders couldn't understand what she was doing, but it was a trap, and they fell for it completely. As the Terran ships closed in on their targets, their advanced hacking systems disabled the Concorde's shields. The Terran vessels released a volley of disruptor missiles, crude by Concorde standards, but effective in their simplicity. These missiles cracked open the hulls of 2 dreadnoughts, sending massive fireballs of molten metal into space. The chaos was just beginning. With Verax's command fleet now in disarray, the Terran forces launched another calculated blow. Using stolen Concorde navigation codes, they led the fleet into an asteroid field, a vast graveyard of ancient space debris that the Concorde had long considered uninhabitable. But for humans, it was a perfect battleground. The asteroid field was a labyrinth, and humanity knew how to navigate it better than anyone. The Concorde fleet, heavy and cumbersome, struggled to keep up, getting caught in the debris or losing track of their targets. By the time the dust cleared, the Unyielding was on fire, its hull breached by multiple strikes, and half of the Concorde's fleet had either been destroyed or scattered. Commander Verax, in disbelief, realized that this was no mere insurgency. This was a war, not one fought with raw power, but with ingenuity and unparalleled tactics. Humanity had proven something crucial. They didn't need to match the Concorde's firepower. They only needed to outthink them. In the wake of their devastating defeat, the Concorde was in turmoil. The Unyielding was limping back to its dry dock, its once imposing form now little more than a scared relic of an empire that had grown far too complacent. Commander Verax, shaken and furious, demanded an emergency session with the Concorde Senate. The galaxy's elite was no longer unified in their arrogance. Their fear was palpable. But as the Concorde scrambled to regroup, humanity's influence spread like wildfire through the galaxy. The rebellion had ignited something far more dangerous than just a war. It had sparked a revolution. Alien factions, once subjugated by the Concorde's iron fist, began to question their loyalty. Some, long under the heel of the galaxy's largest empire, saw humanity's rise as a beacon of hope, a symbol of defiance that resonated with their own oppressed histories. The Concorde had assumed their control was absolute. They had ruled the galaxy for eons, and species under their rule had grown accustomed to it. But they had overlooked one crucial factor: humans. As intelligence streams poured in from defectors within the Concorde ranks, an even more terrifying truth was revealed. Earth had known about the Concorde's secret dealings for centuries. From the moment humanity had first unlocked the secrets of space travel, they had been monitored, watched, prodded, and manipulated. But what Earth's leaders had kept hidden from the galaxy was even darker. Earth had intercepted the Concorde's secret archives. For decades, humanity had been studying the hidden history of the Galactic Concorde, how they systematically destroyed entire civilizations that had the potential to challenge their supremacy, and how they controlled the galaxy's resources to maintain an iron grip on power. But it wasn't just the Concorde's cruelty that was revealed. Humanity had discovered the Concorde's most damning secret: the Shapers, a mysterious alien race that the Concorde had secretly made a pact with long ago. The Shapers had promised the Concorde control over the galaxy in exchange for subjugating growing species, including Earth. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for retribution. The Concord, for all their technological superiority, had been nothing more than pawns in a game that humanity was now determined to finish. But even more shocking was the revelation that humanity had infiltrated the highest levels of the Concord Senate. The leak of classified documents, compiled over decades, spread like wildfire across the galaxy, exposing the truth to alien races that had once feared the Concord. The galaxy began to stir. Revolutions weren't just brewing. They were already erupting. And now, with the Concord weakened, humanity had a simple but terrifying message for the galaxy. We are not just your equals. We are your reckoning. The Concord's empire was crumbling. The revelations of their secret deals with the Shapers, coupled with humanity's sudden, brilliant resistance, had caused a seismic shift throughout the galaxy. No longer did alien species view the Concord as an unassailable power. They saw them for what they were: an empire built on deception, manipulation, and cruelty. And now, humanity's strike had laid bare the chinks in their armor. The Concord, once confident that they could quash this uprising with overwhelming force, were now reeling. In an unprecedented move, the Galactic Senate called for an emergency session. The high-ranking leaders, those who had survived the turmoil, faced an uncomfortable truth. Their grip on power was slipping, and the galaxy's other species were no longer content to remain in servitude. But the most critical blow to the Concord's confidence came when a rogue faction within the Senate allied themselves with humanity. These former leaders, disillusioned by the Empire's corruption, had secretly been in contact with Earth for years. Their knowledge of the Concord's deepest vulnerabilities had proven invaluable. Under their guidance, humanity had executed a series of devastating sabotage missions across key military hubs and supply chains. The once mighty Concord fleet was now crippled, scattered across the galaxy, unable to mount a unified defense. The Terran forces, led by the indomitable Captain Ilara Voss, pushed forward with unrelenting force. Her fleet, now an unstoppable juggernaut of human ingenuity and alien rebellion, launched coordinated strikes on the heart of the Concord's power. The first target, the Concord's central command hub, a heavily fortified fortress on the capital world of Audiobook. As humanity's fleet descended upon the planet, the Concord's final hope lay in their ultimate weapon, a colossal orbital defense platform, the Empress Wrath. It had been designed to obliterate entire fleets in a single strike. Its systems were integrated with the most advanced technology the Concord had ever created. But once again, humanity had outsmarted them. Captain Voss's intelligence network had already cracked the platform's security protocols, rendering its once impenetrable defense systems useless. The battle over Audiobook was fierce. Terran ships darted through swarms of Concord drones and automated turrets, avoiding the deadly flares of Empress Wrath as they engaged in a brutal game of cat and mouse. But the human ingenuity that had already shattered the Concord's fleets now crushed their final stronghold. In the final moments of the battle, as the Empress Wrath began to disintegrate under a barrage of well-placed missiles, Commander Verax issued his last desperate order: retreat. It was too late. The damage had been done. The Concord was no longer an empire. It was a shell, defeated by the very species they had once mocked. As Audiobook burned, Captain Voss stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the embers of the once great Concord fade into the void. Humanity had won. The battle for Audiobook was over, but the war was far from won. Humanity had dealt a crippling blow to the Concord's military might, but their empire, so vast, so ingrained, could not be erased overnight. The Concord's political machinery, once efficient and iron-fisted, was in disarray. Its Senate, now a hollow shell of its former self, struggled to maintain control, while uprisings surged across every corner of the galaxy. What had once been a cohesive force of dominance was now a fractured collection of factions, each scrambling to survive. In the shattered capital, the remnants of the Concord's leaders huddled together in a makeshift council room. Verax, once the proud commander of the Concord fleet, had retreated to the distant reaches of their empire, his mind plagued by failure. The once mighty unyielding was little more than a memory, and its destruction had marked the last great symbol of Concord supremacy. His fleet, scattered and disorganized, was no longer a tool of conquest, but a symbol of their defeat. What now? A voice echoed through the dark room, cutting through the silence like a blade. It was Krillix, a Concord senator who had remained loyal despite everything. "We can't fight back. The humans." He trailed off, his voice quivering. Verax's steely gaze hardened. He had always been a creature of control, a man who believed in the inevitability of victory through might and order. But now his heart ached with the bitter taste of defeat. "We fight," he said flatly, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. But his declaration felt hollow, even to him. The galaxy had changed. The universe had witnessed the rise of a new power. Earth had not only fought for survival, it had thrived in the face of insurmountable odds, proving that it was not simply a nuisance to be erased, but a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy was no longer the Concords to rule. On Earth, however, there was no celebration. The Terran leadership, including Captain Ilara Voss, knew better than to rest on their laurels. They had won a great victory, yes, but the true test was what came next. The uprising had ignited revolutions across the galaxy, but it had also left a power vacuum. Countless factions now sought to claim the mantle of leadership. Humanity, for all its strength, was still just one species among many. "We can't afford to let our guard down," Captain Voss said to her council. "The Concord is finished, but there are others out there who will try to fill the void. We need to make our mark before someone else does." The galaxy was in chaos. New alliances were forged and old wounds festered. Humanity was no longer a mere footnote in the annals of history. It was now at the center of the galaxy's future. The question was no longer whether humanity could survive, but what they would become. The Concord was broken, its fleets scattered across the stars, its leaders lost in the chaos, and its once mighty empire reduced to ruins. But the galaxy did not descend into the peace humanity had hoped for. Instead, a new, uncertain chapter had begun, one that would require every ounce of the tenacity and resolve that humanity had shown in the war against the Concord. Back on Earth, a sense of profound change hung in the air. The Terran Defense Pact had been instrumental in the overthrow of the Concord, but now humanity faced a new challenge. Forging a future in a galaxy that was no longer dominated by a singular empire. Earth had become the spark that ignited revolutions, but it was also at the center of a new struggle. Who would lead the galaxy? Captain Ilara Voss stood on the balcony of the new Earth Citadel, staring out at the stars. Below her, the streets were alive with celebration, but there was no joy in her eyes. The war had been won, but it had left scars that could not be healed with victory. The galaxy was in chaos, and the old powers, the systems that had held sway for millennia, were now fractured and uncertain. Alliances formed overnight, and betrayals became common currency. The vacuum left by the fall of the Concord was a dangerous thing. Many species had already begun to jockey for position, eager to seize what was left of the power. "We've won, but now the real challenge begins," Voss muttered to herself, her voice carrying the weight of a truth she could no longer ignore. The Terran government had begun the slow work of consolidation. The Earth Republic was established as the new voice of humanity in the galaxy, but it was not a position they could hold on to forever. Earth could not impose its will as the Concord had once done. Diplomacy, negotiation, and the strength of alliances would be the key to their survival in the coming age. As Voss turned from the balcony, a message flashed on her terminal. It was from General Thorne, one of her most trusted officers, now stationed in the outer rim of the galaxy. The message was brief, but its implications were immediate. The Shapers are mobilizing. They're gathering their forces, and they're not pleased with our interference. Voss's stomach tightened. The Shapers, the mysterious race that had secretly influenced the Concord, had been lurking in the shadows for too long. They had made a pact with the Concord, But what would they do now that the empire they had helped shape had fallen? The war was over, but the struggle for control of the galaxy was just beginning. Humanity had won the battle, but the future was uncertain. A new era was dawning, one that would be defined not by conquest, but by a fragile hope, a hope that humanity could chart its own course among the stars, without the shadow of tyranny looming over them. For the first time, humanity had its own future, but the price of freedom was always high, and the galaxy was far from done with them.